Welcome to the Plato Paradigm, a paradigm shift in reading Plato's dialogues. Episode 181, IO 536b to D. Socrates has been giving a different version of the magnet analogy. In this one, there are as many magnets as there are muses, so 9 in this period. And according to Socrates, there are 3 rings in a chain attached to each magnet. The first ring, the one attached directly to the magnet, is the poet ring, and this is followed by the rhapsode ring, and lastly the spectator ring. And it's with the spectator that this analogy began, but the spectator seems to have dropped out, and we're back to concentrating on poets and rhapsodes. The muse associated with epic poetry isn't named here, but this is Calliope. In mythology, Calliope is said to have been the mother of Orpheus, but Orpheus is not an epic poet. He is a lyric poet, and Socrates mentions Homer, Orpheus, and Musaeus, who apparently was a student of Orpheus, according to mythology. They all represent here different types of poetry. They belong to different magnets. The idea of possession or being held is not clear to me. The ring itself is held by magnetic force, but poets, presumably all of the poets of a type, are in some way held by the ring. The poet's ring includes somehow all the poets associated with that type of poetry. Similarly, the rhapsode ring includes all the rhapsodes associated with that type of poetry, and then we would have to agree that the spectator ring includes spectators who are attracted to that particular type of poetry as well. And here I would have a problem had Socrates continued talking about spectators. Spectators seem to have a very wide taste in poetry. They would be attracted to any type of poetry, and not just, for example, Homeric poetry or even epic poetry. This might be one reason why Socrates drops the spectator from his analogy and concentrates only on the poet and the rhapsode. His point, after all, eventually, will be to say once again that Io is interested only in Homer because he is held by the rhapsode ring, which is attracted to the poet ring, which is attracted to the magnet, the muse Calliope. Although, as I said, she isn't actually mentioned by name. The last thing Socrates had said is that the many, in other words, the many rhapsodes, are held and possessed out of Homer, from Homer. They are dependent upon the poet ring to do with epic. He now carries on. Hon su o ion, hes kai kateche ex Homeru, kai epedan mentis allu tu poetu ade, cathiodes de kai apores, hoti leges, epedande tu poetu phthenx etaitis melos, euthus egregoras kai orcheitaitsu he psuche, kai eupores hoti leges. Of whom, that is, of the many attached to Homer, you are, O Io, and you are possessed from Homer. And whenever anyone of another poet, in other words, any rhapsode pertaining to another poet, sings, you both go to sleep and you are at a loss for what to say. But whenever anyone of this poet, Homer, utters a phrase, or we could interpret it as sings a song, immediately you wake up and your soul dances and you are well provided with what to say. If this is the conclusion Socrates wanted to reach, he hasn't added anything to the original magnet analogy. In that analogy, Io was simply possessed by the magnetic power of the magnet and had no techne of his own. Perhaps the only difference now is that the magnetic power is specific. Io is part of the rhapsode ring attracted to the epic poet ring, which is attracted to the epic muse, the muse of epic poetry, Calliope. If this is the case, we have to wonder what the point of this refined magnet analogy is. But Socrates hasn't finished, and we should complete this analogy before we think about it too much. Ugar techne ud episteme peri Homeru leges haleges, ala the amoira kai katokoche, hosper hoi corubantiontes, ekenu monu aithanon tai tu melus oxeos, ho an tu theu ex hotu an katechontai, kai esekeno tomelos kai schematon kai rematon euporusi, ton de alon u frontidzusin. For not by techne, art, skill, craft, and not by episteme, understanding or knowledge, about Homer, you say what you say, but by divine portion and possession, just as the Corybantes sense keenly only that song which is of the god from whom, out of whom they might be possessed. And for that song they are well supplied with shapes, in other words, choreography, and words, but they don't care about the others. Well, the Corybantes are an addition to the original analogy. The Corybantes here in the masculine, so we're talking about male and female dancers, are associated in particular with Cybele and with Dionysus. When they dance and sing, they seem to be in a state of ecstasy, and I'm pretty sure that they were drugged when they were dancing. This would make them appear to be possessed by the goddess or the god. It's important for this analogy that they are not like this with any other song. They are disinterested in songs for other gods. We recall that in this analogy, dancers and teachers and assistant teachers hang off the sides of the three rings, probably off the sides of the poet ring. The fact that there are souls at all attached to any of the rings makes this analogy a bit scrappy in my mind. Io, however, doesn't seem to mind it at all because he doesn't react. Socrates now finishes off his analogy. Huto kaisu o ion perimen Homeru hotantis mneste iopores, perideton alon apores. Thus, you too, Io, about Homer, whenever anyone mentions him, you are well supplied. But when about others, you are at a loss. Tutu destito aition ho merotas. Dihotisu perimen Homero et eupores, peridaton alon hoti techne alla thea moira Homeru de nos epainetes. And the reason for this, which you are asking me, why you are well supplied concerning Homer, but about the others you're not, is because you are terrific praiser of Homer, not by techne, but by divine portion. Now, Io had asked Socrates why he had this condition whereby he fell asleep whenever he was listening to other poets or other rhapsodes talking about other poets, but he came awake and had lots to say whenever Homer was the subject. He did ask that, but he asked that a long time ago, before the other three analogies. This fourth analogy adds absolutely nothing to the answers he's already given. We should say something about divine portion, especially since we have just been analyzing the dialogue Meno. Thea Moira was the final answer of Socrates to Meno's question, can you tell me, Socrates, whether virtue is something taught or not something taught but something exercised, or neither exercised nor learnt, but something that comes to humans by nature or in some other way? And at the beginning of the dialogue, Socrates says he has no idea what virtue is, but by the end of the dialogue, he provides an answer which is actually some other way. And that other way is divine portion. It is the gods who give people arete, virtue. Just as this answer is extremely suspect in Meno, the answer here too is extremely suspect. But the poets themselves do say that the gods are the ones who inspire them, so it isn't so much out of context here as it is in Meno. The idea then is that Io says what he says about Homer and recites Homer and delivers his lines in such a way, not through any skill, not through any learning and exercising or anything like that, but simply because that is the way the gods, or in this case Calliope, feeds him with all of the right moves and the right words.